aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
I learned that from the Nancy Drew Detective.
Okay, go.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
Because I've read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
Hello, regular Drews. Welcome to episode 52.
Hello, everyone. We've got some very special guests with us today.
Yes, we have Alexa and Candace from River Heights Buzz joining us to talk about Secret of the Old Clock, the Her Interactive PC game. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us, too, because this is going to be a two-parter episode where we're going to be covering part one over here and then part two over on River Heights Buzz's podcast. So, Secret of the Old Clock is the 12th PC game from Her Interactive. It was released on July 12th, 2005, for the 75th anniversary of the creation of Nancy Drew. Very, very exciting, very cute, I think, considering that was the premise.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about it?
I was really excited for this one. I remember when they first announced it, seeing the trailer for it at the end of Blackmore, I was so excited to have more games based off the original books, which of course this is based off the first four. So I thought it was a great premise idea. The game itself, we'll talk about it, but yeah. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think it was good. Because as some of you all may know, most of the first games were not based off of the original books. They were based off of a different series of the books, a little bit more of a mature version of Nancy. So this really was getting back to her roots of where she started. And I remember thinking at first it was kind of weird because it was like we were going back in time.
Yeah.
But I mean, it works for this game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's obviously we're so used to, the more modern day kind of Nancy in the games, but I think it was kind of cool that we went back to the 1930s and being able to experience all of that time frame of things that were going on and that kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of cool, at least to me. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, I don't know, it's also a double-edged sword a bit, because obviously these are modern games, right? This was released in 2005. And so I think they did a lot of really good things. I think they really did a good job of with, the dialogue and kind of the plot in setting us in a real place in a real time. But some of the character design and the location design, I think was not super great at that. Specifically just the architecture, some of the buildings, I was like, this doesn't look like a house from the 1930s, you know what I mean? And some of it just really took me out of that. And so as a premise, I think it was great and, a great homage to the original stories, but in execution, I think it was a little shaky, maybe.
That makes sense.
So, do we want to come up with 3 words or 3 small phrases that we think kind of encapsulate what this game is?
Golf.
Golf! Yes!
Golf!
Yes!
Perfect.
I think maybe history or something historic.
Yeah.
Historic golf. And then Alexi said hidden tunnels. That's a good one.
Sabotage.
Yeah. Sabotage inevitably always ends up being one of our 3 words.
Yeah.
Because that is the only like crime that's ever like actually committed in these. I mean, like, of course, theft and vandalism you can say, but it's all because they're sabotaging
Kidnapping.
something. It's always sabotage.
Yeah.
Kidnapping is so rare.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think that's good. You want to go ahead and jump into the summary?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, at the very start of the game, a very 1930s like radio announcer voice tells us that Nancy's friend Emily Crandall has invited us out to the Lilac Inn for some reason. She hasn't told us why, but she just wants us to come out. But potentially it has something to do with the fact that her mother died recently and left Emily the Lilac Inn with only the help of a guardian to run it. Apparently her father died in World War I. So we are driving to the Lilac Inn, and as we approach, we see another car in the drive of the inn, which is interesting, might be important later. And then upon entering the inn, we speak to Jane Willoughby, who is Emily's guardian. Apparently, Jane was Emily's mother's best friend back in quote-unquote capital city. No, I don't know where that was supposed to be. And we kind of learn a few things in this conversation with Jane. We learn that Emily turns 18 in 3 months, at which point Jane will no longer be her guardian. We also learn that the Lilac Inn is known for its pies, which that's interesting. Jane also tells us that Carson has called for us, and that we need to call Carson back. And also that Emily didn't tell Jane that we were coming here until just this morning. And Jane kind of alludes to the fact that this is because Emily has been like forgetful and like seems like off lately, and that she's been kind of like scattered. So she kind of attributes it to maybe it's just because of the loss of her mom or something, but clearly something's weird, and maybe that has something to do with why we're here.
Yeah, which I mean, that makes sense considering she's only 17 years old and now she has very real and adult things that she's going to have to be dealing with.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes sense why she would be forgetful.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, I would assume that the inn is closed for the time being until everything gets settled.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We don't ever really know about that. And certainly
That's
the way that they
true.
kind of make it seem like is they seem like there's lots of stuff going on and it's busy. And when spoiler alert, when the stove explodes later, they're like, we have to shut the inn down. But it's like, there's no other guests that we meet. There doesn't seem to be very many guest rooms if the layout of the inn is any indication. And so it's just like, where are these people? Where are they hiding? And if this is a functioning inn, why is it a big deal when all this bad... If it isn't a functioning inn, then why is it a big deal when all this bad stuff happens? Like, doesn't seem like that
Yeah.
stressful. I don't know.
That's a good point.
Yeah, interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah, because wasn't Emily's mom like previously a dressmaker? So she wasn't doing that anymore and was doing the inn.
Mm-hmm.
Was she doing it by herself? Like,
yeah.
There's some unknown there.
Never even considered that.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's not huge, but I would assume it would take obviously more than one person because I mean, meals and cleaning and general upkeep and.
I mean, presumably Emily helped a little bit with stuff, but we don't really know to what extent. And the game certainly makes it seem like she's been kind of thrown into the deep end. So she can't have been that involved, So interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. And yeah, there's no other staff that we see. And at the end, we even talk about like, hiring staff or whatever. So it's like, who's baking the pies? Like, presumably that was, her mother, Gloria, but who's baking the pies now? Like, they're known for their pies, right? Why? What?
I guess it's Jane.
Or unless they had like a cook or something and he just took the day off or like is not coming in for now until it gets busier.
But we're still doing the pie delivery. For sure we are, because that's a puzzle that we have to do. and
that's
and
true.
loading it in the car, and then at the end with the pie truck and everything. So it's still very much that's a wow, plot hole.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was just thinking, well, maybe it was off season, but the weather is really good the whole time. So you wouldn't think it would be off season, so you would think that there would be
Yeah.
lots of activity.
Interesting. Well, okay. Well, so we go upstairs and we talk to Emily. She and Nancy kind of bond over the shared loss of their mothers. And Emily asks us a favor. She wants us to take her mother's jewelry back home and lock it in our safe because she doesn't have a safe or any way to keep the jewelry secure. And she's also clearly spooked and like worried about something because she keeps like pausing and thinking that she hears someone and she thinks someone's like listening to this conversation. So she like whispers, right? Things are very weird. She says also that strange things have been happening recently, but she doesn't give us a full explanation of what that is at this particular moment because just after she, says that like strange things are happening, we hear a large explosion. Then there's a shout from Jane downstairs that the kitchen is on fire, and so we have to evacuate the building.
Wonderful.
Pretty soon after that, we learn that what has happened is that the kitchen exploded. It's been completely destroyed. There's smoke damage everywhere, which means that the Lilac Inn has to be shut down for months, maybe even for good. The fire chief apparently said it looked like a burner on the gas stove was left on and then something made a spark and, kaboom. But fingers crossed that the inn's insurance company will cover the cost for the repairs, which is kind of a big plot point in this as well. Oh, Jane does tell us, that Emily was the last one in the kitchen and probably the one who left the burner on. But she says, it's no wonder because she's been so forgetful lately with the stress of losing her mom and she's trying to run the inn by herself, basically. And Jane feels like she's no help and poor me and all this stuff, right?
Yeah, that. I mean, she essentially threw her under the bus.
Yes, immediately.
Mhm.
And she tries to play it off by making it seem like she's being caring because well, it's no wonder she lost her mom and everything. But she's definitely it's all her fault. It's all Emily's fault.
That's so shady right there. And as you were just explaining all of that, it just made me realize that not only do we have two Janes in a row, because we had a Jane in Curse of Blackmore Manor and a Jane in this game, but we also had two kitchen explosions essentially.
That's true.
In a row.
You're right.
That literally just hit me while I was sitting here. It's like,
wow. That's a great point. Great observation. I wonder if
a very easy way to not have to animate an extra area.
Yeah.
That's another thing too. There's obviously when you walk in, you see Jane's podium, right, where she's standing. But then there's it looks like there's an extra way, hallway past her and the kitchen. What? Obviously, we don't get to go down there, but what's down there?
Maybe that's where all the mysterious missing guest rooms are.
It's upstairs. Dining room.
There's only 3. Oh, well, that too. Yeah.
I guess we could talk about the location a little bit too.
Yeah, we can. If you want, Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, so for the Lilac Inn itself, when you walk in, like Alexa was saying, there's just that podium in the center, and that's where Jane's standing, I guess, to check in guests. And off to the right is the door to the kitchen, which of course we don't have access to, especially after the kitchen explosion. And then on the left is just a little seating living room area. There's a little game in there that we have to play. And then there is a built-in couch as well. Which is kind of fun, and then a clock that we have to use as a puzzle as well to get something out of. But then if you, once later in the game, Jane moves and you see that there's a sign back there that shows that, dining room this way. So I guess that all that's back there is the dining room for the kitchen. And then upstairs we just have, I think, 4 doors, and we only get to go in one of them, which is Emily's bedroom.
Right. Yeah. And so presumably one of those is Emily's bedroom and one of them is Jane's bedroom or was Gloria's bedroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you would think there's probably a bathroom somewhere. It's the 1930s, so there's going to be an indoor bath of some kind. And then one other door?
One guest room. That's it. They make most of their profit off of pies.
Something that bugs me with these games is there's very rarely that you see an actual room to a bathroom.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Or if you do, you of course can't go into it, but they shut the door and then you hear Nancy talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get
Which
better
I
about
think is
that
a
in later
clever way.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's weird that this is an inn and they're selling pies, so they're obviously moving money and they don't have a safe.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna
Another
make
great
bank
observation.
deposits, you're gonna have money changing hands. Obviously, no credit cards or anything like that because it doesn't exist. But why do you not have a safe? That seems weird.
Maybe they do, but just Jane has access to it, and Emily doesn't want anyone else to have access to it.
Oh.
That
Although
could be it.
she has no reason to suspect Jane would do anything, of course, but
Or does she?
or does she? But I mean, as we're about to learn, I mean, Nancy and her father would have access to it still. Like, someone's still going to have access to it, no matter whose safe she puts it in, I guess. But
Right.
Yeah.
It's just about
it's
who
still
she
kinda-
trusts. But
you're right, though.
also,
Maybe they don't have one.
she could go to the bank as well. Like, it seems like she's got a somewhat decent relationship with, Jim Archer because, we go talk to him later. So, like, why doesn't she ask him? Like, why has she called us? Because also at this point in, like, the lore of this particular game, this is Nancy's first mystery. She hasn't solved a mystery before this. And there's kind of a conversation with her and Carson about that later. But, like, why call Nancy to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe she just trusts the fact that her dad is an attorney, so he must be trustworthy.
Maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
But I mean, I feel like you're banking on a lot there because just because you're an attorney doesn't necessarily mean that you're trustworthy.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of strange how we get there, but
Right.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so so after we finish talking to Jane, she has to go outside to take a call on a payphone, and upstairs we hear Emily shout, "Oh no." So we go upstairs, and of course we learn that Emily's mother's jewelry has been stolen. Of course, we set it up, we knock it down, right?
Yeah.
we knew this was going to happen because she was worried about her mother's jewelry being stolen, and so now it's happened. Her mother's jewelry has been stolen. She's upset about this, but she doesn't seem surprised because this is where she tells us, that stuff like this has happened before. She's kind of reluctant to talk about it. She is adamant that she didn't leave the stove on, though. But now that her mother's jewelry is gone and she can't afford to buy a new stove, and like without the stove, she'll have to sell the inn, which she doesn't want to do. She goes kind of on this little spiral, and she just like exclaims like, "Oh, that Josiah Crowley," right? And she laments, and this is where we learn about Josiah Crowley, right? She laments that he, who was her old neighbor, died last year, and said that he was going to leave them money, but he didn't. So she's upset about that he didn't follow through on what he said he was going to do. He did give them a clock before he died, though, and he would always point to it and say, "Time will tell." But when he passed and they found his will, time didn't tell. There was nothing left in the will for them. She does mention that it did take them a while to find his will in his house, though. But she kind of brushes this off by saying that Josiah was a screwball and he had weird hobbies. And she tells us that he even invited a man named Richard Topham to come live in his house and teach him how to read minds. And that Richard Topham still lives there now because in the will that they found, it turned out that that Josiah left everything to him, including his house. So he's still there. She does tell us, to an interesting bit of lore, that the inn and Josiah's house were built at the same time by two brothers around the Civil War.
Oh.
I only mention that because it is a very clear reference to The Hidden Staircase, which is a book that Corey and I
Yeah, we're on a hidden staircase kick right now. So
yeah, so that is a reference to The Hidden Staircase. After we're finished talking to Emily here, she asks us to go to the bank to talk to Jim Archer about her mother's jewelry and ask if it was insured because it's been stolen. So now she wants to see if she can also make a claim to the insurance company about this.
A very fast turn of events. And I think it's also interesting that Jim Archer is in this game and is pictured as an older character because we know him as Helen Corning's fiance, which would make you assume he was obviously a much younger man.
I've chosen to believe that he is Jim Archer Sr. and the fiance is actually his son. So this is like Helen's father-in-law to be. That's the way I make sense of it. But yeah, I hope that that's not who Helen ends up with because he's not super age appropriate, right? So
well, later in the bank, there's a picture of like a woman standing next to a car, and he talks about like we ask him if that's his car. And and he's like, yeah, it is. So presumably that's his wife.
Helen's got a hot mom.
I was like, is that Helen Corning? I was like, and she was very attractive. I was like, dang.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what the choice was there to give him that name. That's very unexpected, I guess.
It must have just been because they wanted to make another reference, and they're like, we need some random character male name. And it was like, oh, what about Jim Archer? And they're like, great, because Helen's not in it, so it doesn't matter. But what a missed opportunity, because I love Helen. And
I wish Helen would have been in this, at least as a phone contact. It would have made so much sense, because they even reference her at the beginning that she's our mutual friend that we know Emily through, so they could have, but oh well.
Yeah. Okay, Corey, do you want to take it at all?
Sure. Okay. So at this point, we need to call Carson. So we go back to that payphone on the front porch of the Lilac Inn. And he asks us if we can run into town, into Titusville, and do an errand for him. He also gives us some instructions on how to drive our Roadster in the 1930s. It's a very, very important feature in this game that you don't hit too many potholes, you don't run out of gas, you don't get a flat tire. At this point, we do get to go down the path a little bit around the Lilac Inn. Back there, we do find a golf course, like a miniature golf course back there. And then if you keep going down the path, we see like a little detached garage and then another house. We enter the house and we meet Richard Topham, who was living with Josiah Crowley up until the time that he died.
That's another thing about like the house, right? Where it's like there's like the living room area, I'm assuming, and then there's like at least one bedroom. Like where, and then it's Josiah and
where's the kitchen? Where's the bathroom?
The kitchen? Where at least have another bedroom. Like, where's the bathroom? All these questions
it is
about
a weird
this
layout.
house. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I was just looking because you mentioned about the essentially detached garage. And I was looking to see if that is actually correct based on when the house was built, because they said around Civil War time. And it says from a quick Google search, which Google is my best friend, in the 1910s and 1920s is when it started. So maybe that's just a more recent addition to the area, just as a way to try to explain it. But I was curious when that kind of became a thing, because I felt like 1800s was probably a bit too early.
Well, they would have had carriage houses.
Yeah, because there's like
carriage
little
houses and also a barn.
Yeah. Okay, so we meet Richard. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know how you all feel about the mini golf course.
It's
tedious. It's very tedious.
Listen, I don't dislike playing the golf. It's not horrible or anything. It's a little clunky and weird, and it's not too difficult to do once you figure it out. Maybe you have to do it a couple times to succeed, but it's not hard or anything. But it's the design of it that kills me, because again, this is what I was talking about a little bit before. You cannot convince me that there is any way that this golf course was built like in the 1930s or like pre-19. That is a 2005 golf course with like the crazy magenta colors and like the weird like swirly. That's not Art Deco. No. That's not Art Nouveau. What is that? That's like crappy early 2000s big bold like print.
Right.
Like that.
It really is.
It's so out of place. It's so out of place.
So I just Googled again, when did mini golf start?
Oh, God.
And it says that the first known documented game was actually June 8th, 1912.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
So
But
that could track. But again, they're the
apparently the
design.
first mini golf course opened in North Carolina in 1961.
Oh, okay.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe it was just because Josiah, he had his weird hobbies and apparently had money. You can build a mini golf course if you want.
He was ahead of his time.
I guess so. Mined in 2005.
When you guys were playing, like on hole 6, it was like obviously like there's some of them that are in like 2 parts essentially, and like so there's where the hole is on hole 6. There's like a second spot like that a ball can come out of, and I was like, where in the heck is this? Like, can you get that? But we'll find that out later towards the end of the game. And I'm like, it was driving me crazy. I'm like, come on.
That is a good point, yeah. Okay, so we enter this very, very bizarre looking home with all of its weird little buildings outside of it. And we meet Richard Topham. Actually, he greets us by name, even though we haven't met him before. He shouldn't know our name. But we have to really quickly find a mouse for his cat, Yuri, who doesn't like strangers and just meows uncontrollably unless he has his favorite little mouse.
Yuri is my favorite.
He's a very sweet little
my
kitty.
Favorite character in this game.
Yeah. But we learn about Richard Topham's, what he calls his cerebral emanations. So he is...
Not a good enough reason to use the word emanation.
No, it's not. He is a psychic, essentially, and he's got these telekinetic powers where he can move things with his mind. Also, like implant ideas into someone's mind, so like communicate nonverbally. Gosh, this is so strange. And he also has this school where he teaches other people to do this. In fact, he moved into Josiah Crowley's home because they like met when they were at lunch one day at the Lilac Inn, and Josiah was like, why don't you come move in with me so that we can like spend full time teaching how to do these
screwball
psychic
indeed.
things.
A screwball indeed.
We actually learned later, though, that he was at the Lilac Inn right after the fire and happened to run into Emily, and she told him who we were. So that's how he knew who we were when we came in the door. But he's really rude. Like, he is not the nicest guy. He calls us intellectually unendowed and refuses to speak to us until we can, like, solve a series of puzzles to prove that we're, like, worthy of speaking to him and that we won't deplete his intellectual capabilities by having a conversation with him.
Also,
This
it's
guy.
just, like, the world's most, like, stupid, like, puzzles, too. Like, it's, like, they're those little, like, I guess whatever you call them, where they, like, I don't even, I'm sure there's a specific name for them, but they're like little brain teasers. And it's like, you get those in like, like 3rd grade to do.
Yeah, those are pretty easy.
Yeah. Well, we solved those very simple little puzzles, and he agrees to talk with us. We talked to him about Josiah Crowley, and he tells us that no, there's no way that like you could construe this as me like forcing him to give me all of his money or like tricking him into leaving everything to me. I was his only real friend. Everybody else only talked to him and liked him because he had all this money. I was his true friend, and so it's right that I was left everything in the will. He does give us permission, though, to look around the Crowley house a little bit more. We see that that Josiah was an inventor, and he's got all sorts of crazy little inventions around the house. He was also obsessed with A Midsummer Night's Dream, and we learned that he actually played Puck in an onstage show of it, and he has a lot of little clues and puzzles that he's just left behind. We go back into town. We do that errand for Carson, and we just have to pick up some papers from a telegraph office for Carson, but we do get the opportunity to earn some money by delivering telegrams throughout the game. It's actually a pretty, I don't know, I think it's tedious, but it's a way to earn money in the game if you need it. Yeah.
The only positive about delivering the telegrams is the references that you get from visiting all the different locations, but even that is kind of just like, I mean, especially if you don't get half of them, which I didn't. So it's like, cool, but I don't know what this is referring to. So
yeah.
And at least you can't get fired from it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I think it was probably an easy way for them to extend game time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our map of Titusville, we have the whole town. You can go to pretty much all of the locations, and when you get there to deliver the telegram, they'll say little references to the books. Not always to Nancy Drew books, though. Like there's some other books that get referenced, but a lot of the locations are locations from the books as well. So we drive around town a little bit after we go to the telegraph office. We talk to Jim Archer at the bank, and he tells us the recent stock market crash and the Great Depression has things pretty bad, especially things here in town. He says that the Lilac Inn, because it's a small business, he's concerned about it doing well, especially now that Emily's trying to run it herself. But he tells us that his bank is doing great. Don't worry about it. We're doing great over here at the bank. No effects from the Great Depression here. Don't worry.
Don't look over here.
Well, we do get to ask him about the jewelry, and he confirms that it was not insured. Gloria didn't end up renewing her policy on it because she didn't think she would need to, because she was expecting to inherit all the money from Josiah Crowley.
Hold on. What kind of rationale is that for not renewing an insurance policy?
Who knows?
Oh, I'm going to inherit some money, so I don't need to insure my valuables?
Who knows? Maybe the policy was just
sounds
too
like
expensive.
a way to quickly lose all your inherited money.
Right.
Anyway. Yes. So she didn't re-up the insurance policy on her jewelry, unfortunately. But Jim does tell us that he was the executor of Josiah's will, which is interesting information. He tells us he was also expecting to be left money from Josiah, but he wasn't. He also explains that the reason that it took so long to find his will in the first place was that it was actually hidden in Josiah's house. And it took Jim is actually the one who found it, and it took him forever to find it. And Josiah Josiah always said that he would tell Jim where he left his will, like he told that to him while he was alive, when the time was right. Interesting. Also, he tells us that Josiah Crowley took out a safety deposit box at the bank 3 years ago. And Topham has since tried to claim it after Josiah died, but he can't find the key, and so it remains unopened. We don't know what's inside the security deposit box or safety deposit box. We also talked to him because we see the picture of his car in his office, and we realize, oh, hey, that's the car that we saw outside the Lilac Inn before the fire started that was gone after we left, after the fire. And so we ask him about it. And he's cagey in his responses. He's like, why would I be at the Lilac Inn? What are you talking about? So it's like, okay, all right. Interesting. Also in Josiah's office is a picture of someone named Clara Pickford, who is signed. And he says that she was someone who used to come into the bank frequently a while ago, and she stopped recently, which is weird, but she insisted on leaving me a signed picture of herself, and so I've hung it in my office. It's very odd, but it will of course be relevant later. Also in Jim's office is a big ornate clock that isn't working, but we can eventually get it open by finding a key somewhere, I think. I don't remember where.
Isn't that, we get the key from something, don't we? What do we win the key in?
I know that there's a key.
I want to say we find it.
Oh, no, it's the jewelry store.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wait,
the key that he had appraised.
It.
Yeah.
We buy it because we find the receipt
right.
flowing in the wind.
Yeah.
That you have to catch.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so after we do a little bit more in the game, doing some puzzles and delivering telegrams and all the things that we need to do, we go back to the inn, and we learn from Emily that she's upset right now because a picture on the wall moved all by itself. She tells us that actually last week a book fell off the shelf by itself, and she's been hearing weird noises all the time. There's been creepy whispers just coming from nowhere. She's been hearing this every single day for a little while now. Nancy tries to comfort her by telling her that she thinks that Josiah Crowley did have another will all along, and the one that they'd found previously was actually a forgery. But Emily tells her, I think that you should probably just go home, give up on this thing. You don't need to be here for this, basically. But Nancy's like, no, I'm going to stay. I'm going to figure out what happened to this will. And so Emily lets her stay. So we explore a little bit longer and we find a secret passageway that leads from that couch that's built in the living room. So we actually were able to like pull something on the drape, the thing that holds the drape open. We pull that and it like opens this lever that opens up the seat of the couch and we can go down a stairway there. And there's a long tunnel that appears to have been used somewhat recently, at least since the house was built, because there are electric lights running through this tunnel. We also find a little, like a puzzle in the corner that you do the puzzle and you find a record just inside this like box in the wall, which is very strange. And then we come to the end of the tunnel and we find another ladder there. We climb up the ladder. We realize that we are directly under Josiah Crowley's house. This long tunnel connects the two homes. So clearly another reference to the hidden staircase. Wonderful. We hear Topham talking to his cat in there, so we don't go in the house right now. Of course, we have to like sneak in later so that he doesn't see us come in. At this point, I think we have all the clocks that we need. So we have to do some more puzzles to unlock the clocks, but we get a mirror from each one of the clocks. And then if we're able to do another puzzle to unlock the barn door, garage door, whatever this building is, we go in there and we can set up this like light system with the mirrors so that it lights up this, what is it, a spectrometer? What do they call it?
I don't know, but it's the most annoying animation, and it does it every single time. You have to go out there, and I want to pull my hair out. They were clearly very, very proud of that animation.
He worked very hard on this animation, and it, like, whenever you get it working, basically it like lets this staircase down or this ladder down from the ceiling, and you can climb up into the loft in the barn, where we find more clues that tell us that we have to get a key out of the brim of whatever his hat's name is, Marcel.
Marcel, I think.
Because he named his hat because he's an eccentric old man.
He's funky like that.
Yes. So we go and we find Josiah's hat. We find Marcel. We find a key in the brim of the hat, and it is a safe deposit box key. So we bring the key to Jim Archer at the bank, and he lets us like go in and open up the safe deposit box. But we also, during this conversation, we learned that he had lied to us earlier. Actually, the bank is not doing super well with the Great Depression. Actually, he was really hoping that Josiah Crowley's money would help with the bank and everything. And actually, he was talking to Topham earlier that day, hoping that he could get a loan. So that's why his car was outside of the Lilac Inn. We also learned that he really wants to get a dress for his wife, who may or may not be Helen Corning, but he can't really afford to pay a dressmaker, so he makes Nancy sew the dress for us. Or he asks us to go to Jane because she used to be a dressmaker. So we go to Jane and we ask for her help with the sewing, and she's like, Nancy, I haven't sewn in so long. I don't even remember how to work a sewing machine. Like, that's one of those things that you forget instantly upon not doing it anymore, right? Just like
not
a bike.
Like riding a bike at all.
Yeah.
Very technical. I can't even sew a stitch anymore.
What is thread?
It's been 5 years.
So long. So Nancy ends up having to sew the dress, but once we finish the dress, he lets us go in and open the safe deposit box. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I forgot this part. Whenever we go and ask her about the sewing machine, she gives us Gloria's old sewing box with the thread and needle and everything, and that's where we find the picture. Oh no, when she leaves to go get the box, that's when we find the picture of the brothers that they are kind of hanging out by a staircase in the tunnel, but we didn't see that staircase in the tunnel earlier. So that's very interesting.
It's like, even when Nancy was going up in that kind of like secret tunnel that we find, she's like, it seems like she seems really jumpy. And I'm like I get it.
That tunnel is spooky.
And it's like, there's hardly any light that you can see where you're supposed to be going. And it's like, at least have some kind of lantern or something or other. At least one or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will give props to the, game developers here. That is a spooky tunnel. Like, there is creepy sounds of dirt moving. Sometimes you'll hear footsteps like that aren't yours.
Right.
And also but the only critique that I have of that is the music doesn't change when you go into the tunnel.
Oh
So
yeah,
like
it
you're
should.
just upstairs. You're just upstairs and it's got like the, kind of upbeat walking around the end music. And then you go down into the tunnel and it's still the upbeat walking around the end music, except you're also hearing like really weird noises. So
Yeah.
it's like, if they had just committed a little bit extra to the soundtrack there, it would have been excellent, but alas.
Oh well. So we do go back down into the tunnel, and we're able to, after seeing where the brothers were standing in the photograph, we were able to figure out that there's another lever that we didn't see earlier that opens up another portion of the secret passageway. Once we get that door open, we find another hidden staircase, and that puts us up on this little landing, which we realize is directly behind the wall in Emily's room, meaning that you're able to, from your little position in the secret passageway, use your hand to like move that picture aside to spy on her and see what she's doing. And of course, if you're like breathing or anything like that, move it around, you can hear it from in Emily's room, which explains why she feels like she's been watched. Because she's being watched.
Because she has been watched. Because
Yeah.
somebody's peeping on her through a peephole in her
Ah!
wall. A 17-year-old girl.
Ugh.
Ew.
Not okay.
The implications
Not
are
okay.
big ick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, of course, we have to go confront Jane about this because it's like, you had that picture right there. How did you not know about the secret passageway? But Jane is very defensive and she's like, 1,000 people walk by here every single day because there's so many people staying in our one bedroom and so many people in the dining room that's been exploded. Obviously, there's people all around all the time. Anyone could have seen that photo. In fact, anybody could have seen that photo except me because I had never seen it before now. I've never seen that before in my life. Get it away from me.
There's lots of stuff behind this podium. I don't know what you're talking about, Nancy. It's not like I stand here 24/7.
Right.
I will say though, it seems to me like you could really easily play it off as though you had no clue where that picture was taken though, because it's just a tunnel. And if you didn't know that the tunnel existed at all, which
right,
maybe she didn't, she's only been here for a few months, I guess.
But the back of the photo gives instructions on where to find the tunnel. So,
it does. Oh, never mind.
It says like bench under or stairs under bench or something in living room.
I missed that one. Never mind.
But Jane also tells us that Emily has gone into town to run some errands, so now we have the opportunity to do a little bit of snooping.
So, hold on one second. Is that the last time that we can ever speak to Emily in the game is when she tells us about the, before she goes to leave on these errands? Because after this, I was never able to see her in her room again.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't think we did.
I don't think I was able to see her.
And it's just such a weird, way to kind of just like leave that character. Like she's the one that we're supposed to be caring about, who is in like this, hard situation.
Yeah.
We're supposed to be connected with her through Nancy, like, the grief of losing a mother or whatever. And then it's just like, we never see her again.
Bye.
That is weird.
Like she's mentioned, in the final letter and everything, but I don't even think we see a picture of her there. There's no there's no real resolution, and this is an odd part for me. But I kept wanting to go back and talk to her about all the stuff that we were finding and doing. But every time I'd go up to her room, she'd just be gone. I'd be like, I guess she's still in town. I don't know.
That's a good point.
But yeah, so since Emily has gone into town to run errands, we can, of course, take advantage of this opportunity to go snoop in her room. And we can look more in the drawer underneath the window seat where she sits, because that's where all of her mother's keepsakes are, as well as, stuff that Josiah gave to Gloria. So we find in that drawer a little note from Josiah to Gloria that has some cryptic phrases on there that we'll need to actually solve the old clock puzzle in the barn. There's also a letter from Jane to Gloria that they're kind of talking about, I guess, whatever preparations that Gloria made in the event of her death. And Jane said that she'd absolutely take care of Emily if anything happened to Gloria, but don't worry, you're going to be fine. Jane also tells us a little bit about her life and where she's living, which is a boarding house. She tells us it's kind of sketchy, though, because there was a woman there named Marion who went through her purse recently that she found. So rude. Can't believe someone would do that, right? Yeah, and so all of that kind of happens, and eventually, after we end up doing the alterations to the dress, we can go back into town, give the dress to Jim Archer, and get into the safety deposit box of Josiah Crowley's. We're like, okay, come on, it's gonna be a will, it's gonna be the will, it's gonna be the will. It's not a will, it's just a journal, another journal written by Josiah. And because it doesn't seem to have any value to it, Jim just lets us keep it. This seems insane to me. I
Can't do
don't what kind of bank this is. What a
Absolutely.
sketch thing. Just because it's not valuable to you, Jim Archer, doesn't mean it's not valuable. And it's like, if I had a diary that I went to the lengths of putting in a safety deposit box, and some rando girl came up and was like, I found the key. It's like, sure, have whatever's inside.
Nope.
Excuse me, don't let someone read my private journal. Clearly, I wanted it kept here a secret for a reason.
That's the point of the safe deposit box, so that random girls can't just take your journal.
Exactly.
Oh, well, we get it. I mean, it ends up being a good thing that we found it because, it helps us, but whatever. Inside of the journal, what we find is we read a communication between Josiah and some folks seemingly named after Midsummer Night's Dream characters, and communication, between Josiah and them from his radio. Okay, so what we realized that we saw a radio in the upstairs of his barn building, right? So we can now go back in there and talk to them. Once we do, it becomes clear that Josiah had given them each a cue from Shakespeare, and that they should respond with a phrase when that cue is delivered. Unfortunately, we don't know what that is, and in order to find out, we have to sneak into Josiah's house to get a look at his copy of Midsummer Night's Dream, because Richard Topham won't let us look at it because it's so fragile, apparently. I don't know, it was a lame excuse. It seemed like he just wanted us to leave.
Yeah.
But so now is our time to go back down into the tunnel and use that ladder to get into the house while Richard Topham is distracted. So we do that. Once we find that, we open the book and we see circled cues that we can use to communicate that to our radio friends. Get their phrases, then translate them into hobo signs. Because I don't know why that is part of the puzzle in this game.
Yep.
Well, that's a real thing. I looked this up. That was a real thing because hobo culture was a full thing in the 1930s, and they used signs to communicate, as they traveled, what areas were safe for them, or just give each other information about the area in their community. And so we find a little thing that tells us what some of the signs mean, and if we use that, we can use that to unlock the giant clock in his barn, because for some reason he decided to have a giant clock built with those signs on it.
Obviously.
What happened to a good old-fashioned key, man, or a combination lock? I don't know.
He's an inventor. What else do you invent when you're an inventor?
But yeah, so once we open that, we find a golden golf ball and a note directing us to make a hole-in-one at Tiny Town. And that is one of the holes in Josiah's mini golf course, the hole that you were talking about, Alexa, you couldn't figure out how to get to. And once we are successfully able to do that, we get another safe deposit key. But wait, Josiah didn't have a second safety deposit key, right? Right? Wrong. Because when we go back to the bank, on the way back to the bank to check, we actually overhear Emily and Jane talking, with Emily clearly upset. Oh, just kidding. This is the last time we talk to Emily. I was wrong before. This is the last time
Yeah,
down.
you're right.
That's okay. We're jumping around a little bit
Um,
anyway.
Yeah, sorry. So on our way back to the bank to check, we overhear Emily and Jane talking, and Emily is clearly upset. And so Jane tells us, well, go talk to her because, I'm clearly no help at all in this situation. I'm just so clueless. I'm just some dumb Dora. Um,
Useless.
what do they call that? Weaponized incompetence?
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so we go up to her room, and Emily tells us that she took a nap earlier, and when she woke up, one of her mother's necklaces was in her hand.
Oh.
What? One of her mother's stolen, missing necklaces winds up in her hand. And so now, of course, she thinks, well, I must be going crazy. I'm having some kind of nervous breakdown. I am not remembering things. I am like, this is unreal. So, you should just go home. Like, clearly this is a me problem, not a you problem, right? Of course, we realize that no, someone's definitely messing with you. Like, we saw the peephole in your wall. We know all this stuff, this elaborate, puzzles that Josiah has set up to like tell people things. But she won't let us, explain anything to her. She's too upset at this point. So she tells us, just go home. And of course we will. Once we go to the bank to use the safe deposit key that we just
Priorities.
And I think that's where we'll stop with the summary for now.
Yes. So if you want to hear the end of this exciting, exciting mystery, you will have to wait until Tuesday, which y'all said you're going to have part 2 of this up on February 21st. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So part 2 of this episode is going to be up Tuesday, February 21st on River Heights Buzz's podcast. I know y'all have said this last time you're on, but do you all want to give just like a real quick where they can find you and everything?
Sure. Alexa, do you want to do that?
Sure. Our Instagram is at River Heights Buzz. Our Twitter is at River Heights Buzz, just one Z. Our email is riverheightsbuzz@gmail.com. And we also have a Facebook group, the River Heights Buzz Podcast Central Buzz. Or you can check us out on like Spotify and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah. We're all over the place.
Excellent.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Really quick before we go, do you guys want to give us just a quick flashlight score? So we, at the end of every episode, we score what we just covered from 1 to 5 flashlights. So 1 flashlight being we hated it, it was really bad. 2, 5 flashlights being it's the best Nancy Drew thing we've ever experienced. Where would you guys rank The Secret of the Old Clock Game?
See, that's a tough one because
it's never easy. We get to the end of every episode and it's always like, I don't know.
Yeah. So the last time that I played this game, I played it on Steam, and it said that the last time I had opened it was 2018. So it's been a minute since I've revisited it. And going into it, I was thinking that it wasn't one of my favorites. And I don't necessarily know that I would call it one of my favorites, but I feel like I enjoyed like the mini games and puzzles more this time playing it. So if it's okay, I'd like to say 3.5.
Oh, it's absolutely okay. You get to score it whatever you want to score it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say 3.5.
Corey and I have sometimes had very opposite responses to certain things. So yeah, you pick your true score for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 3.5 out of 5.
Okay.
Alexa?
I would probably go with a 3. It's obviously like not my top pick, like favorite. Like I love the game, and it's not like, oh my gosh, I hate the game. Like I don't want to play it anymore. It's kind of like in the middle of the road for me because it's like the balance of like, okay, some of the stuff like the games I enjoy, kind of like what Candace was saying. Other stuff I'm like, not so much. But it's like a mix of everything. So I'm going with 3.
It's so hard for me because if I'm thinking about all of the rankings of like her interactive PC games, for me this one rates very low.
Yeah.
Like very low, like potentially one of the worst ones for me. But like, all Nancy Drew things ever, including like Mystery at Crocodile Island, like it's definitely better than that. So 3 does seem fair, but I also really don't want to give it a 3, so I'll give it like a 2.75 flashlights. Just to be
That's
petty.
fair.
Just to be petty. Corey, what about you?
I think I'm gonna have to say 2.5. As I said at the beginning, I really liked the concept for this one, especially before I played it. Like when they announced it, I was like, I love that idea that you're going to take the first 4 books and combine them into one like mega old clock mystery. And so I like the idea behind that, but the reality of the game itself is not as fun as some of the other ones. Like we said, it's a little tedious in parts with the mini golf and all the driving and delivering telegrams and everything. So I don't know. A lot of the fun of the game is just like time filler, time waster. A lot of the time spent in the game is less fun and more just time waster. So it's not the best game, but that's all right.
Also, like, what time spent in the game? I don't know how long you guys
It's not
took
long.
to play this one, but it took me 4 hours on this last playthrough, and I'm like, that is not long enough.
Yeah.
For a game. Yeah.
Especially if you cut out the time driving and playing mini golf, because those things are technically both optional. So it's
right.
So
yeah.
Well, before we go, Becky, do you want to tell them what we're going to cover for 53? So after part 2 of this episode?
Yeah. So next up, we are actually going to be we're going to go back to the Hidden Staircase again. And you might be thinking, you just covered the Hidden Staircase. What possibly more could you have to say about the Hidden Staircase? Oh, we're actually going to be covering the 2019 Hidden Staircase movie with Sophia Lillis. And so, yeah, we hope that you guys will join us next time for that episode. I think it's an interesting one. Corey and I actually had very opposite opinions about it.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we've already covered that movie on our podcast, and so yeah. So
really quick, just really quick. How do you guys feel about the movie as like a little jumping off point for our next episode?
I liked it. I mean,
I wasn't a fan.
I mean, it's like the best. I mean,
there's some stylistic choices that could have been different, but
yeah,
it was different.
I do know.
Yeah,
it's modern day, obviously, but it's like, yeah, I wasn't totally into it, 100%. So
I actually loved it. But you can hear all about that in our next episode, and we will see you guys then, regular Drews.
Yep, see you then.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there, thanks for listening.